Hello and welcome to the WeActually Online Academy. Okay, in our previous video we answered questions 6 through 10, and today we'll look at questions 11 through 15 of the IGCSE Biology Paper 2-1 in the Winter 2019 series. My name is Chris and I'll be your tutor for today. Okay, question number 11. Okay, the diagram shows the leaves as seen in cross-section under the microscope. Okay, so you have to remember the layers here. From your knowledge, you should remember that layer 1 refers to the upper epidermis. Okay, the upper epidermis. Okay, this is the outer layer of cells at the top part of the leaf. Not to be confused with this thin layer of called the waxy cuticle, which is a substance secreted by the upper epidermis itself. Number 2 is referred to as the palisade mesophyll layer. You can identify this layer for the fact that it contains a large amount of the typical plant cell, the palisade cell. Okay, you can see a very high concentration of chloroplasts here. And then you have your spongy mesophyll layer, which is the one that has loads of air spaces for gases to diffuse around in for that. So if we identify the different layers, you should be able to answer this question. So one we've clearly identified as the upper epidermis, so we can get rid of options C and D here as they are incorrect. Since you use your knowledge to identify number 2 as the palisade mesophyll layer and number 3 as the spongy mesophyll layer, the only option here is option A, and A is the correct answer. Okay. So question 12, the pie chart shows the composition of 100 grams of 4 different food levels. Which one provides the most energy? Okay, so you should remember from a balanced diet that carbohydrate is main function in the diet is to provide energy. Yeah. Fats also provide energy as well, but we don't eat many fats really generally as part of the balanced diet. Protein can release energy, but its main function is for growth and repair. Okay, and water doesn't really give us any energy, though it serves a very important part in the diet. So when you look at this question, you're clearly looking for a diet that contains a lot of carbohydrates as the main one. So if you see here that water has the least amount of energy, whereas so we can remove C and D as our options here because water is not going to give us much energy at all. So option B has a total of around about 75% carbohydrates, and that's quite a large chunk, followed by protein and some fats, compared to option A, which is only about 50%, just over 50, maybe 55% looking at this graph. So your only option here can be option B, because it has the most carbohydrates, and this would provide you with the most energy. Okay. Question number 13. One of the symptoms of the disease cholera is diarrhea due to water loss by osmosis, okay, caused by the cholera toxin. Okay, so you have to understand the idea of what osmosis here. So remember from an earlier question, it's the movement of water from a region of high water potential to low water potential. Okay, so what happens here is that the cholera bacterium, it puts additional chloride ions inside the small intestine. So you effectively increase the solute inside the small intestine. And as a result, this would lower the water potential in the small intestine, which means more water will move out of your bloodstream and into the small intestine. And this is what makes your feces very watery and runny. So let's have a look here. It says secretion of chloride ions out of the small intestine. Well, no, we're not looking at out of the small intestine because the chloride ions must go into the small intestine. So secretion of chloride ions out of the small intestine, raising the water potential. Well, again, we identified that it has to be secreted into the small intestine, as that's where the difference is going to be. Secretion of chloride ions into the small intestine, lowering the water potential. Yes, letter C is the option here that's correct, because water's moving into the small intestine, and that's what's making your feces very runny. Okay, secretion of chloride ions into the small, raising, well, no, remember, ions increasing solute concentration leads to a decrease in water potential. So option D is also incorrect, leaving you option C as the only correct answer. Okay, question 14. The diagram shows an experiment kept at room temperature, which is for most scientific investigations between 20 and 23 degrees. Okay, so temperature is constant here. The tube containing starch, protease, protein, and simple sugars. Inside are viscine tubing, and this is obviously semi-permeable, so semi-permeable here. And the reason I put semi-permeable is so you understand that some substances can come out and not all. So what is present in the water after 45 minutes? Well, this relies on understanding of a diffusion. It's asking you what is on the outside. Now, if we remember from food molecules, starch is large and insoluble. That's why it can't be absorbed into the bloodstream without being chemically digested. Okay, protease is an enzyme. Okay, and enzymes, we remember, are made of proteins, and we remember that protein is also insoluble. Okay, so it's not going to come out of the viscine tubing. Protein is also insoluble. Okay, now simple sugars could include things like glucose, fructose, and a few others, and these are soluble. Okay, and the fact that they're soluble should help here. So simple sugars is definitely going to diffuse out of this membrane. However, this is a slightly trick question because it put protease here and it's made of protein. They might think that, well, that's it, you know, maybe protease can come out, but it's not an option. The key thing here is that protease is an enzyme and it will chemically digest the protein into amino acids, which are water soluble. So that means option A is automatically the correct answer because amino acids will be created from chemical digestion, diffuse out. The simple sugars can diffuse out anyway. Okay, but some people might ignore this answer as it's not an option in your selected choices here. But protein is insoluble and therefore won't make it out. Protein will not make it out because it's insoluble, and starch is also insoluble, so it's not going to make it out of the viscine tubing into the area. Okay. Okay, question 15. It says, what is an example here of diffusion? Okay, so let's have a look. Remember, the definition of diffusion is the movement of substances from a region of high concentration to low concentration down the concentration gradient. And if it's talking about living things, then it goes across the semi-permeable membrane as well. Okay, so it says here, dust particles being moved by the cilia and the trachea. Well, no, we're not talking about anything actually moving in and out of the cells. Remember, mucus is where the dust is trapped, and the cilia are actively pushing the mucus up the airway. Okay, oxygen molecules moving into the red blood cells in the lungs. Well, yes, we should remember that gases such as oxygen will diffuse into the blood from the lungs in order to supply oxygenated blood, and it has to diffuse through the cell membranes into that bloodstream. Pollen grains moving from the anthers to the wind. Well, no, this is carried by the wind. This is not a passive process, it's the wind. So particles that are bumping into it and pushing the other particles along rather than the natural kinetic energy from the particles themselves. Red blood cells moving in a blood capillary in a muscle. Well, no, remember that any movement in the blood, particularly in the capillaries, has come from the residual pressure from the ventricular contraction in the heart, pumping it out in the left ventricle. Okay, so option D is not a choice here either. Okay, thank you for watching the video part 3 today. Please visit the website and register for the demo to find out more, and hopefully I'll see you in our next video to continue questions 16 through 20.